Welcome back to the Weekly Report. My name is Darren McKenna, and we are at NCL the day before even. I'm joined again with our very own Javier Carrera, the tax terminator. Welcome back, Javier.
Thank you, Darren, for having me. Hello, everyone from the beautiful Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
And today, Javier and I wanted to do a deep dive and very much talk about the recent events that are taking place in America, more specifically, the bigger question of, is freedom currently under attack, and what that means to either of us? Javier, from your own experience, you've already gone through a degree of this whereby you had freedom and that freedom was actually taken away.
Correct.
And I guess I would love to hear a bit more, especially for the viewers who don't know. We're not going to go a deep dive into the story, but what are you seeing now, and what aspects that are taking place in the States are concerning for you?
Well, first of all, I would like to clarify that as I am not American, I'm definitely approaching this as a neutral foreign observer with the utmost respect for the U.S. as a country and for its institutions. But I will say that I echo Darren's sentiment in the sense where I've focused almost my entire career on the U.S. I've been traveling to the U.S. since I was a kid, and I mainly work with U.S. taxes and U.S. corporate entities. And what I have noticed is that in recent years, I would say 2015, 2016 onward, I definitely noticed that Americans that are in the middle, Americans that don't identify as either far right or far left, are far fewer in number, basically. I used to know, I got to know so many people that would just tell me, hey, I'm in the middle, I'm country first, regardless of party, I want my country to do well. Now, the increasing reality is that I'm meeting people that are very much either Republican or Democrat, and that have a tendency to believe that the ills of these times, the ills of America, so to speak, are to blame on the opposite side. So that is an objective reality I can say that I'm viewing from the outside.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even growing up within the States myself, seeing that there was very much a more open means of actually talking about politics as a whole.
Yes.
And now it's almost like you don't want to bring it up in conversation because of how extreme that polarization is.
Correct.
You're not sure, where the conversation is going to go, or if it's going to get too heated too fast. And I guess, I mean, I'm hoping it goes down, because you even see Trump the other day, I saw him making a comment where he was also just, blaming the left, Elon Musk the same. And then even before, obviously the Trump administration, got into power, there was obviously the Biden administration, and they were playing the same game whereby they were saying exactly the reverse, where they were saying, this is all because of right, rather than, sort of sitting down, talking about it in a logical sense, and actually trying to figure out, what is the actual core of the problem here? How do we actually approach this rationally?
I think it's also a matter of national identity. I think the nation state in general, and you're seeing this also in Europe, you're seeing this to a lesser extent in Canada as well, is that there are many challenges relating to immigration, relating to the loss of identity, national identity, especially among younger generations. I see that a lot. So, I don't mean to be a nationalist, but ultimately, if you're going to be part of a community, if you're going to be part of a country, at least to some extent, you should feel proud. You should feel content with being part of that society, of that system. And so basically the idea I wanted to bring up there is that as you're seeing national identity being eroded and basically this sentiment of belonging, what you also have is the lack of ability of people to come together and basically say what is best for the country. And so ultimately you start identifying more within a subgroup within that society, and no longer as an American or a Canadian or a this or a that. And that generates ultimately a sentiment where we can be part of the same country, but we're not part of the same nation almost. And that divisive situation creates very divisive rhetoric, which in turn creates divisive policies, which in turn weakens national institutions.
And I mean, not only within the States, but we're also seeing this, to a degree within within the EU at the moment as well.
Of course.
I mean, very, very much so within the UK and Ireland. I mean, to some degree within Germany and France.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's obviously slightly different there because, it's unlike America, where the Constitution literally states that there's freedom of speech. It's less so there. But I mean, what are your thoughts about, what's taking place in Europe, and how what happens in America, plays a part in what eventually usually takes place in Europe as well?
Well, I think the U.S. has stronger institutions around freedom because, I mean, the U.S., the American Revolution, the founding fathers did create a constitution that was based on freedom.
Yeah.
It is the most freedom-oriented revolution, I believe, ever to take place in human history, to be honest. You do have natural law being upheld, that beautiful sentence, inalienable rights and the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All of these things that are so beautifully written into the U.S. Constitution that, again, I want to state are still there. I think that idea has been weakened. I think that idea has been forgotten in a large percentage of the younger population.
And what do you think? I mean, does this go back to, as you say, the dilution of that sense of identity that has caused that, or what has allowed that to happen? What has taken place in your opinion, or through your observation?
I think that as younger generations have grown up in the middle of abundance, and I think that as younger generations have been further removed from the struggles that are associated with the defense of that freedom, I think they tend to forget. Ronald Reagan famously said, freedom is always one generation away from extinction, and I think he was completely right. I saw that happen in Venezuela, where the people thought the good times would never end.
Yeah.
And then ultimately people forget that the only reason good times existed is because tough men came from tough times and ultimately created good times, right? The cycle always repeats itself. And so people who are born into good times often don't understand where those good times come from and ultimately, betray the very foundations upon which those good times were built.
And do you think that in order for us to make that realization again, that we're going to unfortunately have to go, complete the cycle again, whereby going through those hard times to make that realization to come out the other side?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the world is cyclical. So the economy is cyclical. I think trade is cyclical, wars, power, anything. You can really look at it from a cycles perspective, and you see that in nature as well, the four seasons, et cetera. Now, to what extent is the U.S. going to completely collapse, for example, in the middle of this, let's say, lower end of the cycle? I don't know. I do think the institutions are very powerful. The U.S. has been through a civil war, a Great Depression, 2 world wars, and ultimately the U.S. has come out on top because institutions are strong. So I would have faith that the U.S. has every single tool in its arsenal to overcome these difficulties, but it has to do so as it has throughout history, which is in a resilient manner and ultimately putting country first and remembering what made America great in the first place.
What is the core reminder, what party you actually support? What is the core reminder for us, for the viewers, for everybody that's actually out there, that sort of reunites everybody under the same banner, if you will?
Wow, I think that's a tough one. I would definitely have to think about that one, but I would ultimately say that being allowed to disagree with your neighbor in a respectful manner has been the exception throughout history, not the norm. So when you have opinion A and you know that you have a neighbor or a cousin or a coworker that has opinion B, and the fact that you're allowed to disagree with him, whether it's on social media or through a friendly discussion, having a coffee, remember how precious that is, how rare that is, and ultimately understand that maybe you will convince them, maybe you won't convince them, but just the right you have to disagree with them is a beautiful thing and is an exceptional thing if you look at it throughout human history.
But I guess, you mean, even tying, I guess, further onto that, it's almost just having the respect to be able to listen to the other person, to entertain somebody else's point of view, regardless of whether you agree with it or not.
Correct.
But it's like, but unless you're even willing to sit down and listen, then I mean, sure, we're never going to progress from there.
I agree. And then the other thing you also have to take into consideration is that right now we also have a very strong battle with regards to the facts. Like, for example, I don't want to really get into the whole woke culture debate, but ultimately when things like biology are being put into question, scientific reasoning is being put into question, I think that those topics, at one point you do have to go back and just look at the hard facts. There are certain things that should not be debatable, like, not going back to the Charlie Kirk, situation, he would always ask people, what is a woman? And so for a really long time, everyone could agree, XY, XX chromosomes, what that meant, human biology, genetics. There has been general consensus among scientists for centuries, going back to the Hippocratic Oath, what is a man, what is a woman? And for that to be challenged today, sometimes it's a little bit difficult, because ultimately when you have people who just say, my truth is whatever I want it to be, it's really complicated. So I always think that people can be respected in terms of their perception. People can be respected in terms of their worldview, but they must understand what elements are objective and what elements are subjective. You can feel a certain way, but that doesn't make it necessarily a reality.
Yeah, and I guess that's a very good point as far as making it a reality, because at the end of the day, it's how are you perceiving things, you know, and whether it's actually, I mean, regardless of whether it's widely accepted or widely seen as true or not, but it's being able to step back, see things objectively, and go from there.
And what I do think is that the U.S. does have a very positive element to it, which is that ultimately both sides do like the idea of freedom. Now, I think that both sides are talking about freedom in a different way, embracing freedom in a different way. But my general view would be, on the right, people need to keep in mind that national security is important, national integrity is important, national identity is important, but it does not have to come at the detriment of freedom to trade, freedom to start businesses, the right kind of immigration that has really, fueled America's economic growth for, as long as I can remember. And
almost within its foundation.
Within its foundation, correct. And then on the left, I would say be very wary of social justice. I think equality, justice, these things sound really, really good, but you have to really focus on how you're achieving this. If we're talking about equality in terms of I have the same rights as you do, the same, inalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. I have the same right to appear before a court of law and to have my contract enforced, same as you do. That's one thing. But when we're talking about equality of outcome, that's when it starts getting dangerous, because ultimately that means I take resources from B, who worked hard for those resources, and reallocate them over to A in order to achieve this equality of outcome, which becomes very dangerous. And that undermines incentives, that undermines people's ability to seek a better life through entrepreneurship, through hard work.
Creates resentment for those who worked hard for what they have.
Of course. And we talk to people from all the world, right? And so UK, Ireland, US, Canada, and there is a sentiment of, listen, I work hard for this. How can I sustain a family? How can I sustain a lifestyle that I work hard for when you're taxing me? Like, for example, in Ireland, you can speak from this, personal example, 50+% tax rate. I mean, that's just basically inhumane for me. That's unsustainable. I don't know how you do it. And for me, that's really, really strong when you take a look at it. And you do need to allow people the freedom to basically pursue their own goals. And to pursue their own goals, people need their own resources.
Very much so. And again, this goes back. So if you start taking any of those away, it further causes that divide, a problem for people who want something for nothing versus those who want to work for what they actually have.
Correct. And understanding where everything comes from. Because I speak to many people, especially in my generation and younger generations, who say, well, but everyone should have the best standard of living. And so you talk to these people, especially in North America and Western Europe, and they feel bad for people like in Venezuela, for example, or in Africa. And they're like, how can you work for these wages? And I explain to them, listen, the only reason why you're able to turn down X amount of wage, or you're able to turn down these conditions, because your parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents went through that stage for you. But, people in Latin America and Africa and Southeast Asia are in the stage that most great-grandparents and grandparents were in the developed world, which means that if you deprive a Venezuelan, for example, from the opportunity of working for $100 a month because you think it's inhumane, like I could see people in New York saying, how in the world can you accept that inhumane, exploitive wage, whatever? But ultimately, that is what will allow that person to network, to grow, to learn. And before you know it, that person, if that person plays their cards right, they could be a top income earner within a few years. I mean, that's my story. My first wage when I started working as an intern for a US law firm, I was making $300 a month. I mean, people would view that as exploitation, but it was that job that opened the doors to America for me. And if I hadn't had that job, and if I had had a system that told me, no, you can't work for such a low wage because it's unfair, it's inhumane, whatever, I wouldn't be where I am today.
And is that do you think there was more of a mindset? I mean, is that mindset necessary to see it objectively, to go, okay, listen, this is temporary, and this is where I'm going to go, and this is what I need to do to get there. So it's just like, I guess being able to see the bigger picture of like this is just a stepping stone, but I'll eventually get there through hard work.
Exactly. Well, number one, you need to be able to view things long term. I think my generation especially has a major issue with everything has to be instantaneous because it's the Instagram generation. Well, I was born in the 90s, so I still have a notion of what life was before social media, albeit less than you do, for example. But but what I mean by this is that I think the new generation is used to everything is instant, instant gratification, instant everything. If I'm not a millionaire immediately,
I'm a failure.
I'm a failure. And that's not the way it is. If you talk to any self-made millionaire, they'll tell you about humble beginnings. They'll tell you about that one first job, that big opportunity that changed everything for them, and how you need a plan. You need to view things long term. And ultimately, when you view things long term, it's going to be hard work at the beginning, but then there's residual income that comes after that because you start having more efficient ways of making money and you open up more doors. And that's how, ultimately in a natural process, you start improving.
On that subject, there are many, many, many talks that we're actually going to be having here at NCL over the course of this week. Javier, you're leading a few of them. Can you give the viewers a little bit of a taste in some of the subjects or topics that you're going to be covering here at NCL?
Yeah, Darren. So, I think it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting week. We're going to be talking to people from all over the world, crypto space, people involved in geopolitics, different parts of the world. And I think what is so valuable about NCL is that it reminds me kind of like my early years in Model United Nations. So for anyone who went to Harvard World Mun, big shout out. You're doing the right thing. It's a great thing to do. And so NCL is basically like the adult version of it, where we have real people that are involved on the ground in different parts of the world that are seeing things firsthand, and we concentrate them into one single space.
A few interesting panels as well.
And a few interesting panels, and anything from surviving chaotic times to protecting assets to surviving tax changes in 2026. Like everything is going to be completely mind-blowing, I believe, and you have to keep up with all the changes. And I think now these panels, these interviews will allow people back home to have at least an idea of where the world is heading, and you may agree or disagree. That's the beauty of freedom.
Yeah, this is it.
But at least you're informed. That's the good thing.
Yeah, and we met a few of the actual guests there over the course of the last few days. It's been good fun. So we will be sure to keep you up to date. Please let us know in the description below. Do you think freedom is under attack or not? And as always, we'd love to hear about what you'd like us to talk about next. My name is Darren McKenna.
And Javier Correa.
And we are signing off here from NCL, and we'll see you next week.
I'll be back.